of this week's Sedra, we read about the dreams of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's dreams, we're all very familiar with them. He has two dreams. He dreams firstly that there are 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows coming out of the Nile, and the 7 thin cows eat the 7 fat cows. And then he wakes up, goes back to sleep, and he has a second dream. 7 ears of corn on one stalk that are full, and then 7 stalks with individual ears of corn that eat up the fat stalks. He wakes up, and then the Torah tells us, Vayhi b'boker, it was in the morning, Vatipoem rochoi, his spirit was agitated. Why was his spirit suddenly agitated after the second dream and not after the first dream? He woke up after the first dream and went back to sleep. The second one, it was in the morning and he was agitated. Well, the reason is because he realized that the dreams, which is why he wanted them interpreted, the dreams were a message. And he understood that the cows, the thin cows eating the fat cows, that meant there's not going to be a lot of meat around for a certain amount of time. What happens when we don't have a lot of meat? So we eat a lot more bread. We can survive on that. He goes back to sleep, and then he dreams that there's not even going to be enough grain to make bread. And therefore he wakes up and he's very agitated because he realizes that what this could possibly be is that there's not going to be any meat, not going to be any bread, and it is a famine. And so what does he do? He tries to have this interpreted. He tries to have it interpreted, and then the butler opens his mouth and says that my sins I acknowledge today. I meant to tell you about this Joseph that was with me in prison, and he interpreted our dreams. You should get him. So they quickly get Joseph out. They give him a haircut and bring him presentable to Pharaoh. He tells him his dream, and listen carefully. Paro says to him, behold, Paro speaks to him, I was standing al svas hayor, on the bank of the river. If you look carefully, at the beginning, when we're told about the dreams, it simply says, Paro was standing on the river, or over the river. Here he changes it slightly, and he says, I was standing al svas hayor, on the bank of the river. And the reason for this is because he wanted to really see whether God was with Yosef, with Joseph. The butler had told him that he interpreted it based on the Spirit of God, and he wanted to see, so he changed it slightly. And Yosef turns round him and says that, yes, you were standing by the river. And the Medrash talks about this, he was standing by the river. And so that's why he says, behold, here we have Ish Asher Ruach Elikim, boy, a man with the Spirit of God. Look, think about it. Paro had all these advisors, all these ministers there, these stargazers, astrologers, astronomers, and they would have been experts in interpreting dreams. And in fact, he goes and he says to them, please interpret this to me. And so what made Yosef stand out, where he realized his interpretation, as opposed to the other interpretations, was the correct one, was because Yosef knew exactly what was in the dream, and he could only have had that from God because only Paro knew exactly what was in the dream. Then Paro says something very strange. He turns round to him and he says to Yosef, he says, look, please interpret it for me, because I have told this to my chartomim, my stargazers, but ein magidli, nobody is telling me, which is a strange phrase. Ein magidli, nobody will tell me, because before he says, please interpret. Up until now, it's always used the word interpret. Here he says, ein magidli, nobody will tell me. And the reason for this is because they were afraid. They were afraid. They knew, and they had different interpretations. One, the Medrash says, one interpreted it to mean you're going to have 7 daughters and then bury 7 daughters. Another said you're going to have 7 countries you're going to conquer and then lose them. But they were all afraid to give him bad news, and therefore they were whispering between themselves, and Paro was saying to them, please interpret it for me. Ve'ein magidli, nobody would actually tell him. Yosef was the first one to actually express what exactly this is, interpret the dream, and he recognized that his interpretations were correct, and this what the dreams must be, and therefore what happened next of making him in charge of the whole process was seen to be a natural progression from there.